Hey everybody, instead of plugging our Patreon, which we usually do, I'm going to switch it up and go over and plug Duckfeed.tv/tipjar. If you're a person who buys things from Amazon.com, that is a great place to go because you can use that button there and buy your stuff on Amazon as usual. And you know what? You pay the same amount and we get a kickback. This is a wonderful way to support the network if you don't want to be doing the Patreon stuff, or if you want to do something in addition to the Patreon stuff. It goes a really long way, and it's as simple as dragging a bookmark to your toolbar or whatever. So once again, that is Duckfeed.tv/tipjar, and use the Amazon link there for any of your online shopping. Thanks.
Some of our landings were desperate adventures. We are now prepared to meet the inevitable counterattacks with power and with confidence.
My name is Gary Butterfield.
My name is Kole Ross.
And you're listening to Bonfireside Chat. It is a beastly appendix.
And this week we are reading your responses to Hemwick Charnel Lane. Illusory was not able to join us because of a scheduling thing. We're recording this after the usual time to peel the curtain back. But we appreciate him joining us for the main episode.
Yeah, absolutely. That was, I think that's one of our stronger episodes of the season.
Yeah.
I think that we do better when we have more to speculate on and there's less in stone.
Yeah.
And Illusory is a really good guy.
Definitely.
And fun to talk to. And I like what he does so much. He just put up a thing today that was about like an unused menu. I guess at one point in Dark Souls 1, you were going to be able to trade stats for humanity. Just interesting. Man, it's the gift that keeps on giving. It's very, very cool.
Awesome.
Yeah. So I'll go ahead and get us started with your responses and follow-up and the like. A little bit of follow-up here from Luke. Luke says, via contact. Just a quick note in defense of Frenzy, the most frustrating of all of Bloodborne mechanics. You guys seem pretty put off by the fact that Frenzy hurts you a la bleed when the meter fills, but given Miyazaki's stated description of health in Bloodborne, it sort of makes sense. Your health bar is actually a measure of your will to fight on, which is why Regain works the way it does. You don't just absorb your enemy's blood through osmosis during the fight, your morale increases as the tide turns in your favor. Similarly, blood vials seem to heal you in the same way that alcohol or cocaine does. It is a drug in this world, in that they give you a blood buzz that allows you to ignore your wounds and push on. So Frenzy, arguably a poor word choice, is akin to a mental break, your brain getting pushed too far by what it is observing, and something vital within you snaps. It's likely when this happens that your character is simply succumbing to the beast plague and go hairy, Bloodborne's equivalent of hollow, which is why it's so brutal. As for the execution, I would have loved Miyazaki to take something from Lords of the Fallen and implement the POV casualty differently. It shouldn't trigger when enemies are looking at you, but when you are looking at the enemies. Having to turn your back on some enemies during the fight to save your sanity, or better yet, wear a blindfold during some sections, would have been far more interesting and more of a fitting mechanic than the one that exists. So it is flawed, but I think Cole's initial approach is the right one. The idea is solid beneath the bad execution.
Yeah.
Well, I don't like when you say the idea is solid behind the bad execution. Like, yes, the idea of having your mental acuity affected by what you're looking at is solid, but I don't think it should affect health at all. Like, right. I think the idea is like it's the very core of the idea that's okay, and almost so abstracted to the point of like not really resembling what it actually is.
Yeah, and
like that all makes sense. Like, I'm not saying it is a bad argument. In practice, it's still terrible.
Yeah, it still affects the game in a negative way.
Yeah, like a really negative way.
Yeah.
And not even like, it would have been a little bit better if it did less health or if it didn't keep going. The idea that you have of like, you don't look at the enemies, that's great. I think that's really cool. But it still wouldn't have fixed it.
Right.
Like, I think at the core, I disagree. I think at the core, it is a bad thing. It's not just a question of it being tweaked. I think it's a bad mechanic.
Yeah.
Like, I wanted something else for sanity. That's just me. Like, I would have liked to have that sanity affected in a different way. I get that this is your will to fight on. That makes a sense.
Yeah.
But it just, yeah.
Yeah, I'm trying to square that away with the actual visual effect that triggers once you frenzy, like the burst of blood from your head.
Yeah.
That pops in.
Yeah, and I think that's supposed to just be you just hemorrhaging from insanity, which again, like, that's cool and all in theory. But I would have liked to have had something that actually played with your mind more. And again, like, for all reasons we've stated 1,000 times on the show, because the game does really cool shit with that otherwise. Like what if there was a frenzy state that you're in? So we already have all these insight states.
Yeah.
There was like black phantoms and shit that showed up when you were frenzied. And then the meter would run down and they would disappear, but until the meter ran down, you had to escape them.
Yeah.
That's really cool. Like,
or if enemies just got stronger, like, it didn't summon new ones, but enemies you were fighting got black phantomized.
Yeah. Like that's and it's literally a timer. So you can wait this out and avoid them, or you can fight them.
Yeah.
It'll be really tough, but you can fight them.
Which
I just feel like the ease at which everyone I've ever talked to could come up with a better idea for frenzy. Like I'm always, I love Miyazaki. I love the Souls games. I hate Monday morning quarterbacking, like his shit. But like the fact that it's so easy to come up with cooler ideas just makes me feel like it's a real misstep.
Yeah. And once we get to the areas of the game where this really comes into play, I think we're gonna make a little bit more hay with it too, because right now, like, it's just an effect that comes up twice in very limited circumstances. But there are whole levels in this game that are kind of built around this mechanic.
Yeah, when right now, like, people who are playing along with us are probably like, "Why is this a big deal?" But you will hear us bitch about it more because it's integral to the experience of the actual game, and the guests we have on those areas are also probably going to talk shit about it as well. Like, I've only heard kind of intellectual defenses of it. I have never heard a mechanical defense of it, or like this is actually fun.
Right.
I haven't really heard that. So I don't want to dismiss your argument, Luke. Like, it is well reasoned and it does make sense. It just doesn't. It's not a very like gameplay first.
Yeah.
Mechanic.
I think we all wish it was better. I mean, even he does too.
Yeah. And the idea of you having to avoid enemies is really cool. Or that blindfold idea. I don't know what that would exactly look like. Even if it just like hampered your equipment, like you had to wear the scholar or the choir.
Yeah, I could see that, but that also means you have to dip in and out. There's like no way to quick change unless it was something that just took up like an item slot, like that you activated, like the lantern. Maybe
it would become like a safety bit. Problem in Final Fantasy. Yeah. Like the idea of you just keeping them off the camera is really cool, especially if they couldn't see you too. So then you get some like amnesia shit where you're hearing these things sing and like move around behind you. But if you are keeping the player camera off of them.
Oh man, Arkham Knight does some amazing stuff with what's in and out of camera.
Oh yeah. Do you have that on disc?
Yes.
Do you mind if I borrow that from you at some point?
Yeah, I'll send it to you when I'm done. I don't know when I'm going to be done, but I'll send it to you.
I don't want to spend $60 on it, but I really want to play it.
Yeah.
So that's awesome. I'm really looking forward to that.
Cool. Yeah. And your address is.
Oh yeah. Well, I'll just throw it on my PayPal. My PayPal is this, and the password is this. You can PayPal yourself some money for shipping. And
let's see here. I'm going to go into the actual responses. Luke had a response to the area as well. So Luke says, after the mounting fear and frustration of the prior areas to the lane, just to save us from having to pronounce ambiguous words, the lane was a literal walk in the park. From seemed to have put the game's Green Hill Zone 4 odd bosses in, which is an odd choice, but a comforting one. The mobs are mostly brittle, the tough enemies strike out alone, and the boss is more Storm King than Smo. While it may technically be vestigial, the lane was a much-needed exhale after hours of kept breath in a tense chest. Then, while helping people through the area, I realized that I was actually playing the hard version of the level. Like safe home bases, every Green Hill Zone needs a remixed revisitation with a tougher enemy introduced, and this made me appreciate it even more. The addition of the freakish suit monsters felt like a fun secret to hold from these other players, with their clean little minds. What a surprise awaited them. While I had already liked the idea of the witches summoning these creatures to halt my progression, that they were only able to do it to those corrupted by knowledge felt even better, and added a new layer to the game, albeit one not really picked up again. As someone without a leather fetish, I like it when Souls games show that they have more tools in their cupboard than difficulty. You don't have to struggle against a level to be satisfied by it. Weaving a story into the walk will do just as well.
Yeah, that's well said.
Yes, very well put.
Like, I feel like at some point I have an essay in me or a backer blog about like the difficulty angle is my least favorite marketing or noteworthy thing about the Souls games.
Yeah.
Like the fact that it's become this badge of courage and people talk about it in those respects, like they're missing the point so hard, and that bums me out.
And it's so exclusionary too. Like, I don't like that one bit, actually.
Yeah. Like, oh, you're good enough to beat, like, I'm good enough. Like, and even it's weirdly enough, and it's, you can mark your bingo cards, because it's been a long time since I've said the word Gamergate on the show, but like that was a thing for a little while. I would see Gamergate people when they were talking about real gamers and not real gamers, they would list Souls games as their credentials.
Yeah.
Which like we could go on forever about how stupid the idea of real gamers versus non-real gamers is. Like, that's repugnant. But to use something I love so much and an aspect about it that's not necessarily like, it's like number like 20 on the list of things that are awesome about this series.
Yeah.
To see something that I love used, like paraded out like that is really shitty.
And, we've talked about how satisfying it is that, it's fun to work for something and, think that it's, so like that, like to an extent that's not possible without some level of difficulty. Right. But like glorifying in it kind of seems like glorifying in the most superficial read of something. Or grasping at a straw,
It's just, they're so rich that, like, yes, you can notice that, but move on to notice other things as well. Like, it's like difficulty is like, I want to be the guy.
Yeah.
This is something different.
Yeah.
Like, these are more special than that. And, like, something that will come up through this Bloodborne season as, like, I process my feelings on Bloodborne and, like, we talk about it more, will be this whole idea that, like, and I mentioned the last episode, but, like, my favorite bosses in Bloodborne are not the hardest bosses.
Right.
My favorite areas are not the hardest areas. Like I like this game specifically a lot when it's not leaning on difficulty,
right?
As kind of it's what it's putting forward. Like I just think it's much stronger with ideas and text and environment than it necessarily is in terms of challenge.
Yeah,
not meaning it's less challenging, but like the way it handles those things is a little bit better than the way I think it handles challenge. And as I move through Chalice dungeons, as we prepare to tackle those, like that, I'm doubling down on that feeling as well.
Yeah.
Because a lot of those are straight up fucking tedious nightmares,
Yeah.
It's not a good use of challenge.
It's definitely the challenge laid bare and showing that challenge in and of itself is not a worthwhile thing to build an idea around.
Yeah. And the fact that like, it's not like don't anyone get upset because there's more to the Chalice dungeons than that. I understand that. But it's just when people talk about the Souls games just in terms of being difficult, they're really missing the point.
Yeah.
So
yeah, Luke is spot on. Like it's super nice to have a breather level because pacing is very important.
Yeah, exactly. And it just, even mechanically, like it's interesting because it's not just that it's easier. The fact that it's easier allows you to engage with different mechanics than you would. Like when moving through Hemwick, like you are able to take it in a little bit more and you're planning your kind of encounters. You're not overwhelmed. When you're dealing with the boss, you're thinking about the boss rather than just kind of like reacting and figuring out, patterns to dodge. Like it requires a different kind of pace of not just like the action, but also a pace of play that engages different different verbs and stuff. It is, I think the game could have actually used a little bit more of that stuff.
Me too.
Personally.
Yeah.
Jeff says via contact, those dancing women. Or those damn dancing women. There's an ultimate horror in the imagery, idea, and execution of Hemwick Charnel Lane. It's the horror of recognizing that your scared, brainwashed ancestors must have felt when they saw any group of women dancing in the forest. Superstitious and fearful, they just knew that this was a sure sign of witch activity. When I first saw the graveyard, the road women, that slow circular waltz, it was a moment of collective time travel. It was also thematic whiplash. If we take the concept of dancing being a sin, the connection of dancing imagery to witchcraft, and the collective religious outcry against that activity from our recent and long gone past, we realize that little moment of extreme discomfort that Hemwick Charnel Lane creates with its very first image, we can almost get at the same question that seems to permeate through all the Soul series. What do you actually know? My ancestors knew this dancing was a sign of witchcraft, that it was evil, that it was wrong. And here, in the modern day, a simple sighting of this makes me feel that all over again. But then again, what do I know? Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it is definitely unsettling imagery, I think, because of the cultural baggage associated with it,
Yeah. And it's not, the thing about dancing is it's not overtly to our mind sinister, but it does have those connotations. And it's like The Simpsons, like flying a kite at night.
It's something so unwholesome about it.
Yeah. Like just like dancing in a graveyard is really different than dancing at like the Sadie Hawkins dance.
Okay.
So,
you said Sadie Hawkins. I gotcha. Okay.
What did I mess it up?
No. I just I about did a Community joke with the Sophie B. Hawkins dance.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know that joke.
No, that's fine. It's barely a joke. I said it, just mistaking those two.
Okay.
But yeah, it's definitely like a tonal mismatch too, right?
Yeah.
I love the idea of Lawrence being like John Lithgow in Footloose.
Yeah.
And just, he was so cracking down on all that dancing, so he exiled these women and their perversion to the outskirts where they could dance on high and
We always
perform
talk
their rites.
We always talk about in Souls games when someone is doing something non-aggressive and how effective that is. Like we talked about it in the Scholar episode about the Ivory King, the women who are just like sitting there.
Yeah.
Your first time through, things like that. Like non-aggression is so powerful as a activity for an enemy to do in a game.
Yeah.
Like having them do something innocuous when you come upon them just feels good, especially in a game where like literally most of the time, I mean, this game is a little different because people do patrol, but they're patrolling for you. In other Souls games, you run into hollows and they're just facing the way that you're going to come, staring at you.
Yeah.
Until you aggro them. Like, it's a pretty silly when you think about it. And this is, now that they've opened up that kind of dynamic, characters are going to move around, like having them do more things than just hunt.
What's kind of funny about it too is like Demon Souls was actually ahead of the others in this regard because they would actually have like I think they played a little bit more with what like a lack of souls did to somebody, and there were a lot more like repetitious actions they would do. Think about like 3-1 when the whatever the Dreglings they were, they wouldn't straight up attack you, but they would come and try and grab the hem of your garment.
Yeah.
It can be read as aggression, right? And eventually they will hurt you. But it's super unsettling that, to see the behaviors that their conditions are manifesting. And that's very much the case with this too, right? Like there is something off about them that is making them act like this. And it's good that, the system is able to keep track of them doing that and use it as an aesthetic to make it, genuinely very creepy.
Yeah. Yeah. Even when I think about Demon Souls too, like, when you first start running into hollows, actually, like in Demon Souls, they're always doing something.
Yeah.
Like in the only time they're just standing there waiting for you is in Voltaria, where they're standing behind bulwarks.
Yeah.
And waiting for you. But when you run into people in Stonefang, like they're working the mines. I think like time is going to be so kind to Demon Souls.
Yes.
Like in the Souls series, because there's so many things that it did really, really well and better than some of the later entries in the series, I think. Yeah. Not like in general better, but like some little touches like that.
Yeah.
It's interesting that you have to go back that many entries to see this kind of stuff, though. Yeah. Agreed.
Let's see here. That was you. I will read Doug's next. I really enjoyed this level, but for a long time I was scratching my head to figure out its significance in the overall plot. There are no lore notes, and I can't remember running into any NPC who even references the place. Even the wiki says almost nothing other than Hemwick, because witches. With that said, I'll try and do my best Vati and give my take on what I think this place is about. First, the place is old. The buildings are the kinds of ruined shacks and hovels that suggest the residents of Hemwick predate every other area around it: Yarnham, Canehurst, and Bergenworth. Second, the Big Witch is literally covered in eyeballs, suggesting an extraordinary amount of insight. On the other hand, she hasn't undergone the kind of truly grotesque transformation that would indicate extreme insight exposure. From this, I deduce that the witches have been there a long time, and when it comes to blood and insight, they know what they're doing. Perhaps they are the descendants of the Thumerians. There we go. All of that is well and good, but what does that mean for the rest of the plot? My suspicion is that the Hemwick dwellers acted as consultants for Willem, Lawrence, and their successors. It would seem impossible for Willem to have made any discoveries with the old blood without someone to point him in the right direction, because witches. Looking forward to the cast as always. Fear the old blood, and for that matter, pretty much any blood ever.
Yeah, that's an interesting idea. I don't know if that's. I don't know if I necessarily agree with it. Like it's sound, but they don't, like, partly because they don't seem that way to me. Right. They don't seem to have that level of sophistication to where they could be consulted. With things. So like I tend to go with this being like the idiot version of Bergenworth. Yeah. And when I say idiot, I just mean like backwoods. Like I didn't think of the structures as old in like a dignified way. Right. I thought of them as old in a poverty way. Yeah. But then also as far as them not being, knowing what to do with the blood, like they did experiment with the blood a lot. They did a lot of different experiments. They did stuff with that's what Old Yarnum is about. Yeah. Was them trying to. So they did have other ways of experimenting without necessarily having anyone telling them what to do with the blood. Right. Yeah, and just the fact that you find the rune workshop tool, at the back there, I think that leads me to believe in the cargo cult angle that we laid out. And in fairness, this response came in before that episode was released. Oh yeah, so. and again, like it's not like our interpretation is necessarily best.
Oh, fantastic! Yeah.
It's just I just think that the other thing too is too much insight isn't what turns you into a monster. Right. Like that's not because Willem is king insight. And he's just we'll get to him eventually, but he's he's not a monster. So what turns you into a monster is different things,
right?
I think so. But I mean, it does make sense, and it is just. I think that what you're picking up on, Doug, and that what I liked, and the reason why I liked the last episode so much is that like when your Vati's Vidya and your Name Bros Epic have not like made their way through an area and glorified it. Yeah. It is it's really fun because like obviously you can come to your own lore conclusions before reading stuff, but it's more fun and very fun when there's not very much there.
Yeah,
I think, and that creates, at least for the show, it's very fun. Yeah, and fun for me.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think that read is definitely accurate, endemic to the area, at the very least.
Mitch says, via contact, I love this area. It was empowering in a way that only the Souls games can be. The enemies were satisfyingly strong while falling easily to my holy blade, and this aptitude against a worthy foe is something that only Souls games ever really give you. This is only highlighted by downing the executioners that rocked my shit at the beginning and Pinwheel 2.0, but it is that pride before the Nightmare Frontier fall that the games just can't do like a Souls game. That's why this place is so great.
Yeah, that's back to the pacing issue, right?
Yeah. Yeah, because we are, heading towards Bergenworth.
Yes,
so we are going to get to where shit gets real, and this is kind of a breath before that, for sure.
Yeah. Tommy writes in via Facebook saying, I know some people find the look of this area cliche, but me and the guys I played it with were blown away by the cool classic witch tale look. When I saw those witches dancing, I felt like I was in a classic dark fucking fairy tale. And then he puts in a sad smiley face for some reason. And the carriage pickup later was such a great moment. I don't mind when things are classic, and I absolutely loved the atmosphere. Boss-wise, they were pretty easy since I was there with a friend. It was cool going into the back room afterwards as well. Yeah. I mean, like it's like this is kind of like one of the big classic fantasy areas of the game, but like you can look at, I mean, Dark Souls has a lava level. In fact, so does Dark Souls 2. So does Demon Souls. Like cliche is not necessarily a bad thing.
Like witches are one of those things that was cliche before, but I don't really feel like are cliche anymore.
Yeah.
Like how often do you see a witch as a bad guy? Now, like it doesn't really come up that often. Witches are out.
Yeah.
So doing that kind of classic, like Baba Yaga-esque, like, folktale witch, like I just don't see that very often.
Yeah.
So, thanks Wiccans, for normalizing your Hot Topic lifestyle.
Boy, please don't write in if you're a Wiccan. We respect all beliefs.
Yeah, don't dance at us. So Jack says via contact, what do you think the significance of the fact that Hemwick Charnel Lane is filled with mostly female villagers? Also, you notice that if you kill the first female boss, Vicar Amelia, the area will actually get harder, making the summoned areas appear once you choose to kill the Vicar before going. You think gender plays a part in this section lore-wise?
So the summoned enemies, the mad ones, that actually is a function of insight and not it being dark.
Yes.
Right. So that doesn't have to do with Vicar Amelia being a woman.
I thought of this in terms of gender. I didn't really have an answer. I don't think it's related to Vicar Amelia, other than just that's like it's the witch zone. But there are men here. There are brick trolls.
Yep.
There are executioners. Like there are male residents of the village. It's just predominantly female, and the unique people are female. But I wonder about the mad ones. I wonder if those are men.
I think those are beyond beyond that distinction.
Well, I mean, at some point, like if the men from this village were mostly wiped out for some reason, maybe they're these demon things that are summoned.
Yeah.
No.
I mean, like I'm gonna say Wicker Man, and I understand that the Wicker Man where all the villagers were female was the Nick Cage one, not the great Christopher Lee one. God rest his soul. But yeah, I think it's kind of like that. Like this is a society of witches that probably drove everybody out. Maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Are you with me that the male for witch is warlock?
Yes.
Okay.
And that is for the dumbest reason, because of Bewitched.
Okay.
All of the male witches in Bewitched were warlocks. Uncle Arthur was. So
there are a couple of kids that me and Elizabeth will babysit sometimes, and I was having a discussion with them about warlocks, and they were not buying it. So
really?
I was like, I just wanted I'm going to go to those kids and say like, listen, buddy, I asked the internet, and they agree with me. So
my buddy,
10-year-olds can go to hell.
We do a podcast.
Yeah. Hey, heard of it? Put down your Minecraft for a fucking minute and learn a little bit something about a real game, you fake gamer kids.
Fake gamer kids. I love that. Can we do a sketch? Fake gamer kids. Yeah. Well, I mean, I think that warlocks practice witchcraft.
Yes.
But
yeah.
there's
not like warlock craft.
Yeah. Although in the Harry Potter universe, like the female ones are witches, but the male ones are wizards. However, witchcraft is a more primal version of that, I think. I associate wizards with like intellect based, whereas witches are more of a wisdom based kind of thing.
Yeah, it's kind of weird because there are sorcerers and sorceresses.
Mm-hmm. Charisma.
Wizards and then warlocks and witches.
Wizards and wizardess. I've heard wizardess before.
Yeah, wizard. I guess I have heard wizardess.
Yeah.
Mages and, schmages.
Maguses. Yeah.
Yeah, maguses. Yeah, I guess that's true.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, in answer to your question, I don't think there's that much lore to it other than that it's like a witch.
Yeah.
Witchness.
It can be a witch thing. We're down with the witchness.
Yep.
Andrews writes in with our last response here saying, he writes in via contact. I like Hemwick a lot because of how bite-sized it is compared to the areas that come before it. Short, but still complex enough to make exploration rewarding. The boss is a nice change of pace from all the huge and aggressive beasts feeling more like a battle of wits than reflexes. Also, isn't Hemwick Charnel Lane just about the witchiest name you can give a place where witches hang out?
It is. It's the witchiest.
Yeah. I mean, I think I can think of other witchy names. Newt's Eye Circle.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure, yeah.
Broomstick Alley.
Cauldron Junction. Yeah. Thanks everybody. And moving on to just a little bit. I don't have anything to add to that. I agree with you, Anders. Just a little bit of just fun in here to
Are you okay?
Things out. No.
Oh, sorry.
But Clint says via contact, I'd like to thank you guys for Bonfireside Chat Season 1. I played along while listening and beat the game at last. It's a good feeling. Knowing how robust community support was for Dark Souls 2, I felt prepared to meet the inevitable sequel with power and with confidence. Scholar of the First Sin gives me pause, though. I hear that jack the difficulty way up, and I wonder if the Scholar of the First Sin has enough Sunbros. What's your take? Is Scholar still tough but beatable for a medium-skilled Soulsman? Is the co-op still plentiful? Which do you feel is a better play experience? It's a good question.
It is.
Because I will never have, and no one will ever have, the experience of like pre-patch Dark Souls 2, and very few people will have the experience of pre-Scholar Dark Souls 2. Like that is a long season-wide document we made that has made, made irrelevant wildly. By I mean, a lot of the lore stuff still holds, but the made kind of irrelevant by what we did. I can speak a little bit to the idea of co-op, and in that a lot of people are playing Scholar.
Right, more people probably than vanilla by now, right?
Yeah, and a lot of people have moved there because the co-op scene for Bloodborne has seemed to dried up very fast, and people are going back to Scholar. So there, at the very least, there are people playing. That doesn't necessarily mean that they are not just invaders, but there are people in the online community. So that makes me think that like maybe the tide will rise, all ships kind of thing. So there will be some more, more bros. Going on in there.
I as for the difficulty, I can't speak to that. Irresponsibly, I've not beaten Scholar. I can say that it is more difficult, but I only can say that based on, having played and memorized Dark Souls 2. And the surprises are there, and that's a lot of the enjoyment that I'm getting out of it. I can say that it's definitely stronger. If something that you liked about the previous Souls games was that what was the item placement and the enemy placement storytelling, like it's going to be much stronger, and I think that it's going to be a better kind of like entry point to get into it.
Even if it's harder, it's still better.
Right.
And I would say it is harder, but even when Dark Souls 2 came out, we thought it was harder. Than the first one. It is harder. But there's a lot of things like once you kind of figure out how to play it, like all the Souls games, like you can ameliorate that. Souls are like candy in that game. Like you can level up very frequently. Especially compared to Dark Souls 1 or Bloodborne. And grab a co-op person. I think there probably are a lot of people playing Scholar. So I think you can bring some help. And you'll be okay. Nothing feels outright like unfair in the remake, I think. Like and also you won't have that previous knowledge working against you. Like you have no expectations, so that will balance things a little bit in the other direction as well. So I would say go for it. I think you're in for a good time.
If you end up going for it, write in and let us know how it worked for you. We're going to be covering Scholar of the First Sin here pretty soon.
We're going to do like one big episode about it.
Yeah.
The gameplay changes and the like.
Yeah.
Have changed it, which I'm looking forward to.
Yeah.
Doing that again because I beat it when Scholar came out, but I'll probably play through it again. I liked it a lot.
Yeah.
So it's good shit.
Definitely. I'm going to go on to Jonathan with more just funnin'. Is Gary Italian? Every time he says it makes a sense, I get a little chuckle. I understand. I understand. He means what he is saying kind of makes sense in a certain context, but I keep hearing the broken English of my Italian relatives. My grandmother used to say, "Oh, that's a nice honey." Whenever I showed her something, it reminds me of how Mario introduced himself. "It's a me, Mario," or "It's a me, Gario."
Nope. But you did guess at when I say a sense, I just mean a certain kind of sense.
Yeah.
But that is funny. I'm just glad that you're not calling me out for saying Every once in a while, I will vanity search our podcast especially if I'm feeling down and I'm like, I'm feeling, and nobody likes me. I'll vanity search the podcast and like the vocal tick I get called out for the most is saying because I say it really fast and it sounds like I'm saying yo.
Yep.
Which is very funny. I'm just like yo. I'm just throwing that in all the time. But long ago, I have decided that maintaining a relaxed atmosphere and a natural form of speech was more important than me necessarily stomping out every single misspeech that I make.
Yeah.
I try not to, I try to keep it under some semblance of control, but when I'm making the most mistakes is when I am the most engaged, and I feel like it probably balances out in the favor of quality. Or I like to hope that the fact that I'm into it and excited is enough to make it better than if I was, speaking with perfect diction.
Right.
And I don't speak with perfect diction anyway. Like I've got a real rural, low-born mouth going on, which is the name of my smut novel that I'm going to write about my mouth.
That's horrible.
Like, boy, you got a rural, low-born mouth. I'm going to bale some hay into it, if you know what I mean.
Oh, man. Don't say that.
But then what does it even mean? Like, it doesn't.
I don't know. It can't mean something good.
Something that you couldn't be grossed out by, but
yeah.
But here we are.
Well, here we are because you made my imagination figure out what does hay map to?
Yeah, making hay.
Sun's out.
It is for horses.
Yeah. I think that, as you see, I just said, people come here for a conversation and we're not perfect. I stumble over my words and, that just ends up being part of our, just part of the charm, right?
Yeah. I think that like, if I listen to a podcast, I get more annoyed by over editing than under editing. Like as I want a nice sound quality. So everything sounds okay. Like a distracting, buzz in the background or something I'm not into, but, podcasts that are edited so aggressively that it's like a couple people rapidly yelling a Wikipedia at you, which I've heard some of that is a bummer to me.
Yeah.
And I like listening to how people actually speak.
Yeah.
So we try to go for a lived-in friendshipy feeling for the show. And hopefully that comes across in my voice. And I hope I hope I'm not coming off as defensive. Like I don't care that
no.
I sound Italian. To answer your question, I'm just European mutt. I don't have a strong nationality one way or another.
Yeah.
So
also on a show where we get guests in a lot who are not necessarily, as mic friendly. I mean, I'm saying that in the nicest possible way. Like
who's mic friendly?
Yeah, I mean, no. Hello. Yeah, no, but just like people who don't do this as much as we do, or are not just perfect broadcast speakers. It's unrealistic to try and make that sound, completely polished, right?
Yeah. And we don't want to edit ourselves so we sound great whenever it's just the two of us. And then whenever we get somebody else on, they sound like like they're mumbling. I would rather just show off the warts.
Yeah.
And the like. And that seems to be fine. That's not a complaint that I get. Even people who tease me about the thing don't actually say it in a mean way.
Yeah.
No, I don't mind. I've come to peace with it. Like I'm getting too old to be concerned, to take myself to task for those things. I have much bigger, more existential things to take myself to task for than the way I speak. This is like, very, very low on the list of things I would change about myself.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So thank you, Jonathan.
Yeah.
And your grandmother sounds lovely.
Let's see here. If you have any thoughts on the Chalice Dungeons, go ahead and send those into Duckfeed.tv/contact. Also, if you have any thoughts on the Forbidden Forest, we're taking those as well.
You should mention when we say if you have any thoughts on the Chalice Dungeons, we don't want to get like a dozen responses about the boss of the challenge dungeons or anything.
Yes.
Because we're splitting that episode. We're doing that over the course of 3 episodes, we believe, right now.
Yes.
That may change, but we're still figuring that out because they map weirdly to our usual treatment. So we are actually looking for specifically kind of first blush. You know, when you first went into the Chalice Dungeons, when you first went into Thumeria and saw what that was like. Those are the kind of responses we're looking for now. Yes. But we will be looking for later. We're going to be we're sprinkling those out like we are sprinkling out our special episodes.
Right.
So, if you want to help out the show, you can go to patreon.com/Duckfeed.tv. You guys have been killing it on there recently, and we really appreciate that. And you can also rate and review the show on iTunes. That is a huge help.
Yes.
And lets people know about the show.
And I imagine by the time this comes out, we will have either gotten very close or passed our goal of 1,000 Facebook likes.
Yeah, which is awesome.
Yeah.
So all 1,000 of you, thank you. And that's a fun, if you haven't signed up, like, it's not just we want to get that feather in our cap. Like, it is a cool place where people talk about soul shit. So we'll post links to things that are interesting to us. And then also our fans and community people will do that as well.
Yeah.
So it is a good soul site, especially if you are sick of the constant, like, get good memes and shit that happen with some Facebook groups of souls. So no one will ever tell you to get good. And if they do, it'll be ironically. So.
Yeah.
And some very brief deleted scenes.
I think maybe just one.
Just one, because when we recorded, I was right before class. I had to go.
Yeah.
So not very much funning around before we recorded, but enjoy this little tiny mini snippet.
Thanks for listening, everybody.
And we all pray that we will have far more soon.
Sorry, you all right?
That sounded like it came from my body, but it's a straw in a cup.
Okay.
So give me 1 second, because I don't know why it's so noisy here at the second. Let me just finish this coffee.
Okay.
All right.
That's some good Foley right there. I'm going to keep that in the folder marked slurp sounds.
Yeah, slurping iced coffee, not wave. Folder marked slurp sound. It's my favorite Beach Boys album.
It's all
the Bleach Boys with slurp sounds.
It's all beverage themed, like parody covers. Weird Al's got the food on lock. But
help me, RC. Help me, RC.
Oh, hoist up the John B. Ale.
Yeah.
So, well, that's going to be our soul deleted scene for this episode.
Yeah.